We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Amber Guyger, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment. No outburst. And it is signed by the presiding juror, who is juror number 11. Mr. Rogers, would you like to have the jury poll?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You may be seated, Ms. Guyger.
The verdict was murder, which then raised the question that a lot of people were asking today: why was this murder and not manslaughter? This just seemed like someone who was, didn't plan all of this, didn't want to do it. Well, let's take a look at why this is murder and not manslaughter. The manslaughter Penal Code, Title 5, Chapter 19, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant recklessly caused the death of another human being, okay? Recklessly. Where in this case is there evidence of recklessly killing a human being? I don't remember hearing any of that. And as a matter of fact, during his closing argument, the prosecutor really did a nice job of explaining what a reckless death would be versus an intentional death. Take a listen.
This is not acquittal. It's murder versus manslaughter. And it's murder. Manslaughter might have been if that second shot that she fired through the wall hit somebody down the block walking around. Maybe that's manslaughter. Maybe. Although I'd still argue that's not clearly dangerous to human life. But you know what? Thank God that bullet didn't hit anybody as she's going in there just guns blazing.
So where's the recklessness? I mean, I'm trying to understand why people are thinking that the shooting was reckless, because the testimony was very clear and the circumstances were clear. She went into the apartment, and are you saying she recklessly killed him? Like she didn't intend to kill him? That's not how it works. And there was no evidence. And I think in this case, and I'm going to ask my guest in just a moment, if this jury came back and found her guilty of manslaughter, I think the defense could have appealed that and had that tossed out because there was no factual basis for it. The prosecution didn't argue for it. The defense didn't argue for it. Nobody argued for it. So it's a good thing if this jury wanted a conviction to stand that they didn't say manslaughter here. Let me bring back in my think tank, and I'll begin, of course, in Texas, because you know Texas law a lot better than I do, Alan Chandler. Was there any sort of argument or factual basis for manslaughter here?
No, and we argued that from the very beginning. It had to be murder. It had to be, because she specifically said, I intended to kill him. I mean, she pointed it. She said, I intended to neutralize the threat, basically. So she looked right at him and said that. Manslaughter around here and in most criminal jurisdictions is going to be the compromise punishment. We're going to find him guilty of manslaughter. He goes, well, not everybody could be unanimous. Maybe half of us are saying, yeah, the other half are like, oh, it's sympathetic, so we'll go with manslaughter. Yeah. And you're right, though. That's not technically the definition. Technically, they should have gone with homicide. They should have gone with murder. Murder was spot on. And so if they would have gone with manslaughter, I think you're right. They could have had an appellate issue.
Would have been a problem.
And so they did the right thing.
When we start talking about manslaughter, we're talking about reckless behavior, like I pointed the gun and I had my finger on the trigger and I accidentally squeezed it, or I'm just shooting at a car that's driving away and then my bullet strikes and kills someone.
They were trying to use that whole scared white woman that they did, which was, hell, I didn't know what floor I was on, and I didn't know what door, it wasn't my door, and I couldn't see this, and I just didn't see that. And that was being reckless. Coming into the wrong apartment was being reckless. And I think that the defense was trying to confuse the jury.
Well, the defense didn't argue for it.
They did. And then another thing is that as jurors, as onlookers, we were like, they would probably just do. We were scared in the beginning. Remember that the grand jury indictment was for manslaughter because they thought that they were going to be able to get manslaughter, like as Alan said, because that would have been the compromise. And then when this new prosecutor said murder, it was like, oh God, let's see what happens. And they did not stop from start to finish. They pushed intent. they pushed intent, and the state
Because it
didn't.
was clear. Let's take a look now at why this is murder, and we'll take a look at the law in Texas and let the folks know why this is murder. The defendant intentionally and knowingly caused the death of another person. I mean, to me, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
The defendant intended to cause serious bodily injury and committed an act that was clearly dangerous to human life, and this act caused the death of an individual. I mean, not only is it just clear before the trial started, as the trial continued, the words of the defendant herself confirmed her intent. Take a listen.
You shot at Mr. Jean, you knew you were using deadly force against him.
Yes.
You know what a bullet can do, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And when you shot at him twice, you intended to kill him.
Yes, sir.
And it started before the trial. I mean, even on the 911 call, she is admitting that she killed someone, shot him on purpose. Take a listen.
I'm an off-duty officer. I thought it was in my apartment, and I shot a guy thinking that he was thinking it was my apartment. He shot someone. Yes, I thought it was my apartment. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Where are you at right now? I'm in, what do you mean? I'm inside the apartment with him.
And then during the trial, once again, she actually sort of reenacted what she did, which she did intentionally. It wasn't an act. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't reckless. It was intentional, the firing of the gun. Take a listen.
I have my gun pointed, and I'm saying, let me see your hands, let me see your hands.
What were you focused on?
Him.
Just him?
Yes.
And then he began coming towards you?
Yes.
And as he became coming toward you, that's when you heard him speak?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do that now, all right?
Yes, sir.
Hey! Hey! Hey!
And that's at that point whenever I shot.
Somewhere in this area.
Yes.
When you shot, what happened?
He fell down.
I mean, she said it on direct, on cross, on the 911 call. I mean, the elements of the crime are what prosecutors have to prove and establish, and it was really uncontested in this case. So, and I understand people look at the whole thing and say, yeah, but it doesn't seem like traditional murder. But you just have to prove the elements of the crime.
Yeah, you can't go into somebody else's apartment, claim it as your own, because you're not looking around, you're just looking at a man with your finger on the trigger, and you can't kill him. That's the lesson.
And then,
you can't do that.
And then she lied. She kept on saying, she said, hey, 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 or, you know, she announced herself. 300 people were in the apartment. Not one person testified, not even in her witnesses testified that she said anything other than that.
The one neighbor did say he heard two distinct voices. He couldn't tell what was being said, but he heard two distinct voices. Alan, I'll let you jump in here because I heard your voice. Go ahead.
I want to clear something up. The defense and the prosecution were both going for murder. They weren't. Neither one of them was thinking about manslaughter at all. And the facts and circumstances that the defense was bringing up were going to mistake of fact defense, which would be a defense to the murder charge, not the manslaughter. So they weren't trying to get any recklessness in there. They were literally trying to defeat the murder by bringing up the mistake of fact. So I just wanted to put that out. I think that's really
Absolutely.
important to say. They were all going for the finish line being murder.
Right, and I want to make it very clear for the viewers because a lot of people were confused why this whole thing wasn't a manslaughter case because, and as Alan points out, both sides are going for that. Now, what the defense was doing was this perversion of the castle doctrine where somehow, and the jury didn't buy it, and prosecutors argued against it, that somehow you could be protecting your own castle when you're entering and intruding in someone else's home. And it's all on the mistake of fact. I understand mistake of fact, if you believe it and you believe it's reasonable, turns everything upside down. But it's like upside down and inside out. And at the end of the day, a jury can decide whether or not they're going to buy it or not. And they weren't buying it. They weren't buying it.
When you think about the facts in this case, right? It was too much to look at to think that this was a mistake of fact. Like, because you're supposed to have, as a police officer, specialized training.
No, right? She made a mistake. The question is, was it reasonable or unreasonable? And if she makes this mistake, is she entitled then to then use the castle doctrine.
To get away with
To
all of
get
it.
away
Yeah,
with
see,
it.
that's where it becomes a problem, is
Yeah.
when you make a big mistake and you kill someone and you shouldn't have, to then go on the offensive in someone else's house. I can't imagine how, maybe like 1L law students, first-year law students would love that and find that cool, but a jury is, we could have told you from the beginning, they were never going to buy something like that.
And then the whole mistake situation, it's her actions afterwards. You know, it's the deleting of the text messages. It's the, it's the weird things that were happening afterwards that just really didn't help their mistake of fact defense. Like if you were a mistake of fact, that's fine. Okay, then render aid. Then do something to help. Like
Becomes
there
offensive.
were just it was just too much.
That's going to be the most in my opinion, that's going to be the most damaging part of the sentencing phase of this, because when all that comes out, there's not going to be a counterbalance for that, because you then look at, all right, if you're begging for some level of mercy, what did you do to the least of these, i.e. Mr. Jean, who is laying down there on the floor?
Yeah, or when the family's in the courtroom and you're testifying and you're not showing any emotion about the fact that you killed somebody. I think that putting the family through that, and now that there's a guilty verdict, I think that's going to weigh into this too. That she could have just pled guilty and spared the family all the drama.
No, but she thought she was going to get off.
And
Like
that-
you could
Do you
see-
think she was confident? Do you
I
think she
think
was confident?
She was.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you had all the
I
confidence
didn't
in
see
the world.
someone who was confident.
Well,
in that
her assessment of anything is
Yeah, like I thought she was
questionable.
confident. She was out on bond. You understand? She had time to go back to her apartment. She was confident. She had the boys in blue back her. She had,
There was no one in that courtroom that backed her.
Oh yes, sir.
There were-
yes, sir.
there were no-
Texas Rangers?
There was
there
no-
was a,
the Texas
there
Rangers?
was a
No.
police officer who
Sometimes
just
when
held
police
her hair.
no, I gotta disagree with you. Sometimes when police officers are on trial, you will see a wall of blue show up in that
Yeah.
courtroom in
That's
support.
right. Oh,
that
okay.
did not happen
I'm
here.
talking about who's
Okay.
the Texas Ranger who
You're
got
talking
up
about
on the stand.
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking
David
about.
Armstrong.
Yes, he got up on the
Yeah.
stand and said she was justified in what she did. And he was the
Justified.
lead investigator.
And-
Jury didn't hear that though.
Right.
Thank God.
But still, that's the issue.
It was like, I think it was like a moment to the society, like, hey, we got you. We're gonna say this crap on the stand, and it was just that's the type of support that she kept getting.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Alan.
Look, I was going to say three things, and I'll be really quick. One is the defense did the best they could with what they had. And, she literally surrendered every element of the offense to them. Boom, here we go. And she did it 3-4 different times. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you're talking about something like this, I got questions all day today about premeditation. Was this premeditated? How come it wasn't premeditated? Did she have? Don't you have to have premeditation? No, you do not have to have premeditation. And even if you did, I used to talk to people, and I'm sure the colleagues on the board will say the same thing. It's like, think of a pink elephant. Okay, that's as much time as you need to form premeditation. So those are some of the things that you're looking at. But the bottom line is, all the things that she did both before, during, and after, and that 911 phone call convicted her.
Yeah.
That was it. It was a conviction. And they did the best they could, but that's it.
All right, we've got the conviction. Next, it's time for the punishment, and we're going to analyze some of the factors that this jury can consider when it's time to dole out the punishment, which again, 5 to 99 years in prison. It's up to the jury. All right, it is time now for the punishment for Amber Guyger. The jury has found her guilty of murder, and that same jury of 12 must now unanimously decide what the punishment will be. If they cannot unanimously decide, then that part of the trial becomes a mistrial, and they will do it all over again with another jury. Just the punishment, not the guilt. The guilt stands. She is now convicted of murder, and the final question for this jury is, what will the punishment be? 5 to 99 years is a huge range that this jury has. So what are the factors that the jury can consider? Well, we took a look at the law in Texas, and these are some of the factors that the jury can consider: the prior criminal record of the defendant, the general reputation, the character, an opinion regarding his character, and the circumstances of the offense for which she is being tried. Now, there are a couple other factors I want you to take a look at that are usually the most important when it comes to sentencing in most states, in most cases, not on the books in Texas, but can still be argued. That is acceptance of responsibility, right? And remorse. Okay, so let's go through these. Let's start with general reputation in this case, and let's begin with some testimony today from Sergeant Robert Watson, who was Guyger's supervisor. Take a listen.
Did there come a time where you made an internal affairs affair referral based on some actions taken by the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you please explain those to the jury?
It was regarding an incident where Ms. Guyger had an individual in custody, and she was by herself, and the individual got away. He got up and ran away. She called for assistance, and other officers showed up to help her.
All right, so what does the jury do with that? I mean, is that a reason to punish her even more? This was put forth by prosecutors in this case.
I personally think that had she done anything correctly, like had all the procedures as a police officer been done correctly from hiring her until the moment at the red mat, both of them, John would still be alive. Had she done anything reasonable as a human being?
But how about this in particular? They put Sergeant Robert Watson up there, who testifies about the time that she let somebody run away when she was by herself.
Covering up for her.
I don't think it was that helpful.
She
didn't pay for. Ultimately, she was not a good police officer. This is an example of her not being a good police officer. But this is another example of the actions that she took that allowed her. She wasn't paying attention to what she was doing. That's how he got away.
Okay, let's move on to another one, which goes more to the character, which I think folks here will have a lot more to say about. And remember during the trial, there was that moment where they mentioned the MLK parade, and there was this sidebar, and then it was obvious to all of us that whatever was in what prosecutors wanted to use was not permitted by the judge at the guilt phase. Well, it came in today. Take a listen.
Message sent to the defendant, when does this end? LOL. Outgoing message from the defendant, when MLK is dead, ... Oh wait, ... Incoming message says, ha. Outgoing message, geez, 2.5 hours on 3 hours of this. Incoming message, you could have met one, LOL, next time. Incoming message, standing at hardwood and MLK on opposite end. Outgoing message, just push them or spray with your pepper spray in that general area.
All right, let's get some reaction. How important is this? I heard a wow.
Yeah, wow. I said wow. That's incredibly important. Yeah, I agree with you, Rachel, because the problem you have is for the first time, America is going to see what an African-American-led jury, with it being predominantly African-American, is going to rule in a case like this where there has been so much injustice in the African-American community concerning the reversal of roles. And I think it's going to be a powerful statement. I think it's going to be a very powerful statement.
It just kind of goes to show you that with her badge, she seems to think that she has extra privileges where she can just, even if she's just joking, I mean, it's obviously not funny, that she thinks that pepper spraying people and pushing them because she's a police officer is somehow...
She's racist.
Well, yeah,
that's what it showed. It
yeah.
was racism. It's an MLK Day. It's racism. She's going to pepper spray people that are trying to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. And she's texting about it in jest.
I think the world revolves around her.
This is a problem. Her character sucks. She's a terrible person.
What's incredibly important that should be taken into consideration is that if you're texting other officers on your city or county issued phones, which are subject to open records requests, then at the department, they should have policies about that type of stuff telling you, hey, you know what? Your records, your phones are subject to open records requests because they don't belong to you. She should know better than that.
Alan, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say, I mean, I think they do have policies like that, quite frankly. Yeah. I mean, she's not a stellar officer. I mean, painted in the best light possible, not a stellar officer. I mean, she's making tons of mistakes. I mean, it'll be really interesting tomorrow, quite frankly, to see what the defense is going to do. I think we already know her. I mean, we've met her through all the things that she said, but this is not a stellar officer.
Got some more. This is social media. There's a Pinterest. I'm not on Pinterest myself, but I know that it exists and people can comment on it. Take a listen.
and it states, I wear all black to remind you not to mess with me because I'm already dressed for your funeral. The bottom of states 357. Amber with a smiley face, saved to love to laugh. Comment, yeah, I got me a gun, a shovel, and gloves. If I were you, back up and get out of.
All right. How about that? And it's the response to the Pinterest post. She didn't post it, but she responded to it.
She's like a.
No, she thought she was G.I. Jane, but then suddenly she was so scared and so whatever when she saw that. Like, come on.
The word "hey" being intimidating.
Yeah,
Hey.
We're supposed to believe that the person who left that comment just said, "Hey,
no, she's ready to go.
No,
that girl's ready to go.
She was ready to make up for the mistakes she's made in the department.
Should never had
She
a
was
gun.
ready to be a hero. She was ready to take somebody down, and she did that.
For just getting in her way, it seems like.
All right, I want to play the 911 call again because this goes again to the circumstances of the event, which again can be considered by the jury during the punishment phase.
I thought it was my apartment. There's plenty of you in there. You have an officer there and you don't know the gate code? No. I thought it was my apartment. Okay, and what floor are you in right now? The fourth floor. Hey, bud, they're coming, I'm sorry, man. Okay, where was he shot? He's on the top left.
All right, it's obvious they didn't accept this mistake of fact defense, but is the fact that she made a mistake by going in that apartment, is that in any way a mitigating factor here that would have this jury go closer to less of a punishment than more of a punishment?
Without her text messages or her Pinterest?
Well, they have to consider everything.
Yeah, so no, I mean, I think that kind of tells you the way that she's approaching the world, the way that she's walking into doors. Yeah, she's ready to go.
There's nothing that makes this go closer to, and I'm not saying 5 years, but swings to less of an offense because it's all based upon a mistake. It is based upon a mistake.
Here's the way I look at it.
Whether it's reasonable or unreasonable,
Here's the way
she
all
did
lawyers-
not go into that apartment thinking that she was going into someone else's apartment.
I'm gonna look at, as always, the totality of circumstances test, right? What did she do good? What did she do bad? If it tilts way one way, well, that's because of what she did, not me. I'm just looking at the totality of circumstances. Unfortunately, in this situation, the totality of circumstances to me leans way against her getting 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Look, I'm going to do one more, which is the accepting responsibility and demonstrating remorse. Now, whether you believe her or don't believe her is another question, but this is a criminal defendant who did accept responsibility through her words and express remorse through her words. You can believe it or not believe it, but most murderers never utter these words. Take a listen.
I feel like a terrible person. I feel like a piece of crap. I hate that I have to live with this every single day of my life. And I ask God for forgiveness, and I hate myself every single day. I feel like I don't deserve the chance to be with my family and friends. I wish he was the one with the gun that killed me. I never wanted to take an innocent person's life. And I am so sorry. This is not about hate. It's about being scared that night.
Most murderers who take the stand before they're found to be a murderer don't say, I'm sorry. They don't say, I did it. She did both. Alan, does she get any credit for that in the punishment phase?
You would think she would, but it's a couched apology. It's like, I'm really, really sorry. Oh my God, this is awful. And how does this affect me? Mm-hmm. You know, so if it was strictly, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and she left it at that, that might have been good. But she keeps going. I'm really, really sorry. And how does this affect me? And that's not really going to help her. Not with this jury, I don't think.
How about the fact that she said, I'm sorry in the 911 call before she's ever charged? before she's ever judged by this jury.
But
She
what else
uttered
did
those
say?
words. Does she
said,
get credit for it?
She said, I'm effed.
Same thing
Yeah.
though. Same thing.
I'm effed. Like, I'm concerned about me because,
Yeah.
he did, but I'm effed.
I'm up. And then it's like
What are you
doesn't-
doing for him? Yeah, what are
you
you doing
did
for
nothing
him?
to help her,
Yeah.
to help him. You did nothing. You could have called on your radio. You did not do that. You called on a regular old 911.
Called 911. She get credit for that?
No.
Most murderers don't call
With-
911.
No.
To use the castle doctrine, to apologize, but then
Correct.
use the castle doctrine.
Yeah.
Seems offensive to me, and it kind of
All right,
cancels out.
But let's take it out of. All right, she's been found guilty. We're comparing when we're deciding punishment. Aren't we comparing her to other murderers?
No.
We can.
We're not?
We can
No,
if you
we're
want to.
comparing-
We're not. We don't put
We're
them on a
not at
scale
all.
and say,
No, we're
okay,
not.
this murderer got this,
No.
this murderer gets that, this murderer did this murderer did that. No, it's all in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Not
it's
in this case, no. Not in this case. And
Why, Alan?
And the reason it's not in this case is because she's a police officer.
There you go.
I mean,
agree with
that
Yeah.
killed her, basically.
I agree with that.
If she wasn't a police officer, a lot of these things would have had it come a different way. But they held her clearly, because they only deliberated for 5 hours, they held her to the standard of a police officer, not down here like the average citizen, but you had
All right.
special training. You told us you had 9 months. You did this, you did that. So
Yeah.
All right.
that's what's going to do her in.
Everyone, everything you guys are saying sounds like 99 years.
No, I'm not saying.
And it may be, but let's find out. Hey, there was a reaction inside that courtroom. We talked about that tonight. Of course, there was another reaction on social media. Coming up next, what you had to say about that. We're going to take a look at that and react to your reaction next. Explosive social media reaction tonight to the verdict and the reaction to the verdict and the upcoming sentence of Amber Guyger, who is now a convicted murderer. Let's get right to it. We begin with, best name ever, Jennifer Frostbutter. Jennifer. So sad for everyone. I agree that she was guilty, but I don't think anyone should be celebrating.
Well, Jennifer and I agree with each other.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly
In
tough
a courtroom.
and tragic.
In a courtroom. You can
In the
celebrate. You
courtroom.
can celebrate outside the courtroom, just
Well,
not in
here's
the
thing.
courtroom.
You got two lives in which have ended, right? So at the end of the day, yes, there's human emotion, all that type of stuff, but Mr. John is not coming back, and Amber Guyger, for all intents and purposes, is not coming back. So it's a tragedy all around. But the sociological implications are bigger than the two individuals involved, and so the hope is that the viewers and everybody can know that the commentary that we're providing you is about the sociological implications, recognizing that this was a tragedy for all the families and everybody involved, because this didn't have to happen.
When I think of the celebration, I think of a victim's family. This is the only thing our system can give them is justice.
Yeah.
And I think of what happens, because I've seen it so many times, when a victim's family doesn't get justice. But when they do, it's a celebration, but it's more of a relief than anything else. But sometimes it does look like a celebration. We're celebrating the verdict. You're not celebrating, you're celebrating the fact that you got some sense of justice and you weren't disappointed and you weren't harmed and you weren't victimized again by the system this time. And I think that's what the family is going through. You're leaning forward.
Well, I also think that there's a movement now that we're into the sentencing penalty phase, that celebration has kind of become a let's go to the max, which I think is different than what you're saying.
I think the jury, this particular jury, knows what type of case it is. I mean, you can see the media coverage, you see everything, you've seen the sidebars, you've seen all of it. It's been in the paper before you even got picked. You know how big this case is. Even before you were picked for the jury, you knew the national implications of this case. So I don't think that celebration for this particular case, I don't think that the celebration really did anything. I mean, you saw that the jury is asking questions.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think it affected the jury in any negative
Here's
way.
something that I think that, and I've been thinking about before I got here today, right? There's this whole Black Lives Matter, right? Do Black Lives Matter? But if you think about it you got 4 types of sentences: interrogatory, declarative, exclamatory, and what's the other one? Question word or whatever, right? Many people come into this from the perspective of, do Black Lives Matter? Like, that's a question statement, right? After you get a jury verdict, you're like, Black Lives Matter, right? From a exclamatory point of view, right? But then you also get, hopefully at the end, a declarative sentence like Black Lives Matter, right? That's what you hope for. But you take it through all of that because that's what people are thinking about when this whole thing started. We were shocked as people who
And
do
that's
this.
why there's some level of celebration in
Yes,
every way
and
you interpret it. Haley writes, this man was a law-abiding citizen in the comfort of his own home, killed by someone who is supposed to serve and protect the people of their city. Just give her life without any chance of parole. Alan, that's not an option here, is it? Life without parole.
No, it's not. 99 years is what we're looking at. And you forgot a $10,000 fine.
Oh, okay.
Here's the deal in this case. This is about healing, okay? This is healing a community. So many people are looking at this case, so you're spot on. It's not a celebration, it's a relief. Thank God she was found guilty, because some people were thinking that was not going to happen. You know, and then what would happen if she was found not guilty? So this is a way that this community, I think, was healed, and that happens in certain trials, and I think that's really what happened here. So.
And here's what Kevin writes tonight, political. I'm not sure that they will make an example out of her. I would hate to be in her shoes. Very sad all the way around for everyone involved. No need for people to act like crazy fools after the verdict was read.
Easier said than done.
I'm not going to respond to that.
Okay. We'll go to Kelly. I can't believe they found her guilty of murder. I'm not saying she wasn't guilty or reckless, but not murder. Hashtag Amber Guyger Trial. Hashtag not a murderer. And we went through this in the beginning of the show, and the reason was because a lot of people were responding like this. So I think one thing you have to understand, Kelly, is that murder that she's been convicted of is different than murder in some other states, because it's murder, but now the jury has another decision to make, and if it wasn't the jury, it would be the judge. There's a range of potential sentences here, which is as important to Amber Guyger as a murder conviction. It's still possible that despite the fact being charged and convicted of murder, she could be sentenced within the range at the end of the day that someone who was convicted of manslaughter, which is 2 to 20. So if this jury gives anything 20 years and under, it's within the same range as manslaughter. So there's, while it's murder, it's not like murder in other cases in other jurisdictions where it's life, or life without parole are the only two choices. There's much more at stake as we continue in this case. Rosanna writes, I can't feel bad for her. As an officer, she did everything wrong, from shooting him to the CPR she said she performed. And that's interesting. Do you believe that the jury is not going to believe her when she said she tried CPR, when perhaps she gets on the stand again during the penalty phase here and says something else? Do you think they are not going to believe Amber Guyger?
She has already put out that she has a propensity to lie. She's been lying the whole investigation. So to say
Which lies?
Which ones? Oh, deleting the text messages, to saying like, hey, she did perform CPR, but just with one hand, because that she did do that. She was concerned. It's a consistent lie. She lies to get herself out of trouble, and she has other people lie for her to get herself out of trouble. So I wouldn't believe anything.
And as a police officer, when you abuse your power and then you don't use your power to protect and serve, especially once you realize you made a mistake, there's just no excuse for it. She's trained to do better. Some people don't have the training.
That's true. Yeah.
Sharon writes, not murder. It was not intentional. It was to protect herself. They are wrong. This was manslaughter at best. Alan, what Sharon is really describing here is justified homicide, self-defense, castle doctrine, which the jury did not accept. It doesn't take us down to manslaughter, does it?
No, it doesn't. What people are trying to figure out is why there wasn't premeditation. A lot of people who don't know the law think, oh, this person had to have a plan, and they had to have a motive, and they had to have, think this through. It had to be planned, pre-planned, and not in this case. No, it does not have. She just had to have the intent to take that person's life, and she did. And they're going to hold it against her because she was an officer.
This is what most people have to understand. Like, there's common law, which everybody, or many people think they have a general understanding of what the law is. There's very state-specific law. And what Alan's talking about is there's state-specific law in Texas that makes it different than what happens in Georgia and other states which may have some level of premeditation to it. That's not the case in Texas.
Yeah, and that's what makes my job here at Court TV so fascinating, is we cover trials around the country, And we have to bring in experts that we bring here on set, and of course local experts like Alan who know the law in that jurisdiction. I practiced in New Jersey. I've lived here in Georgia. I'm kind of comfortable with those two states, but every other state, before the trial starts, I got to read up on it. I've got to research it because there are sometimes big differences, sometimes subtle differences, but that's the challenge here, that the law is slightly different everywhere where we cover trials. Monica writes, why are they presenting evidence for a sentence? Guilty is guilty. Do the crime, you do the time, plain and simple. Again, we're in Texas, not that simple, because the jury will be deciding, and the jury has to hear evidence and hear arguments. Faith writes, so, does Amber Guyger go to jail tonight, or is she still free on bond? Other trials, they handcuff them when they are pronounced guilty. Faith, this was, again, something else we noticed today right away. But what I will let you know, Faith, is that at the end of the day, when the cameras were off, her bond was revoked, she was locked up, she was processed, she is behind bars tonight. Final note, this one from Judy.
Yep.
This poor woman, her son was ripped away from her forever for no reason other than stupidity, and she knew she was going to kill whoever was behind that door without even asking who they were. I feel like she wanted to kill based on her social media posts. She was a hothead, so now Amber needs to lose her freedom forever. And Judy, I'm sure that is going to be a big part of the prosecution case as the punishment phase continues. When we come back, folks, it was another huge day. It may be an obvious question, but there is still punishment to be doled out. So who at the end of the day had a better day today? Was it the prosecution or defense? My think tank will let you know, but I have a suspicion which way they're going to go. We'll be right back.
We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Amber Guyger, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment.
This is a victory for Black people in America. It's a signal that the tide is going to change here. Police officers are going to begin to be held accountable for their actions, and we believe that will begin to change policing culture all over the world.
It's just been like a roller coaster. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. It's just been the most terrible time for me. That both of them were shot and that he died.
Just very nice, personable, lit up a room. He got along with everybody. He was one of those guys when he started his internship, we immediately felt comfortable with him.
He was very active in the church. That I want my brother back.
Outgoing message, just push them or spray with your pepper spray in that general area. I wear all black to remind you not to mess with me because I'm already dressed for your funeral. Yeah, I got me a gun, a shovel, and gloves. If I were you, back up and get out of my
One who had been relatively upbeat throughout the entire trial changed while we waited on those Facebook, social media posts, Pinterest posts, head in her hands. She couldn't even look over in that direction anymore. These messages, these posts had a clear, distinct impact on the jury.
Really an emotional day inside that courtroom. A lot happened, and it may be an obvious question tonight, but we're still going to ask it. Who had the better day today? Was it the prosecution or defense? And we begin with Alan Chandler, who is in Dallas, Texas, outside the courthouse tonight. Who had the better day?
Clearly the prosecution had a better day. They had it because they mapped out their strategy before this trial started. They prepared properly, and they just executed, fired on all cylinders, and took you right to the top of the mountain and pushed you off. So they had the better day, clearly. And so did the people of Dallas, quite frankly.
Quinton Washington, who had a better day today?
I think the prosecution. Jason Fine, in his closing statement, said, not here in Dallas, not here in Texas, not anywhere. right? That's important because Ms. Jean gets some level of closure to this, and the family does as well. And I'm often reminded of Langston Hughes in his poem, I America, I Too America, when he discusses the fact that African Americans have fought for equality and we persevered, and it has not been at the opposite end of patriotism. It has been because of our patriotism that we've done this. And so hopefully she finds comfort in this because she too is America.
Ekelyn Mercy, prosecution or defense?
The prosecution. And why I like this prosecution, because with officer-involved shootings with unarmed black men, you see that the prosecution isn't really as passionate. They're kind of pretty lax, and that doesn't really give confidence to the victim's family or to the community. And here you saw it from day one that they were passionate about this case, that they were passionate about this murder charge, that they were passionate about finding justice for both of them, John. So the prosecution got it for me.
Rachel Kaufman, prosecution or defense today?
I'm obviously going to stick with the prosecution. I think that's they got a guilty verdict in a murder case, and I do think it's a new time. The tides are changing, and juries are no longer just going to accept a police officer and what they say to be the truth, and they're not going to make excuses for them anymore, and they shouldn't. And so, yeah, the prosecution did a great job.
Yeah, I'm going to say prosecution also, and the reason I'm saying prosecution is obvious, right? The verdict was guilty for murder, but there was another part of all this, and that was it wasn't the easiest case in the world, because no one is saying that Amber Guyger woke up that morning and was planning to kill someone, that she had a plan, that she thought about it. She made a mistake. Jury found it was an unreasonable mistake, and at the end of the day, the argument I think that resonated the most for everyone was that you can't be sitting at home doing nothing, enjoying yourself in a bowl of ice cream, and someone cannot come in there and shoot you. It just can't be done. So that was today. Chanley Painter has a look ahead to tomorrow in Dallas.
Vinny, the punishment phase is underway here in Dallas, Texas. So far, the state has called 4 witnesses in its sentencing against Amber Guyger in front of the jury. And we can expect a handful of witnesses tomorrow morning before the defense takes over. They can offer testimony in mitigation. We can expect to hear from Amber Guyger's mother and sister, who left the courtroom earlier today to be outside the presence of the jury. It's likely because they'll be called on behalf of Amber Guyger. And will we hear from Amber Guyger again now in the sentencing phase? We do know that she was remanded into the custody of the sheriff after court today. She is spending tonight in jail, will return in the morning. The attorneys will be here a little bit earlier, 8:30, 9:30 Eastern, to hammer out jury instructions for sentencing. Then the jury will be inside the courtroom, 10:30 Eastern. Vinny, we will be here. Back to you.
All right, Chanley Painter inside the courtroom. Big thank you to my think tank tonight, and our coverage continues here on Court TV. As always, gavel to gavel coverage. We could be in a verdict watch again tomorrow. Have a wonderful night, and don't forget to hug the kids.